This week I'm joined by Rossa Ó Muireartaigh, who is an associate professor at the School of Foreign Studies at the Aichi Prefectural University in Japan. In this episode we discuss his book, The Zen Buddhist Philosophy of D.T. Suzuki, Strengths, Foibles, Intrigues and Precision, alongside discussions on language, time, free will and more. I'd like to say a big thank you to my paid patrons and subscribers for making all of this work possible. And if you'd like to support the podcast, gain access to some exclusive content, or just keep everything running, then please find links in the description below. Otherwise, please enjoy. So, Rossa Ó Muireartaigh, thanks very much for joining us on Hermitix podcast.
Yep.
We are going to be discussing your book, The Zen Buddhist Philosophy of D.T. Suzuki, Strengths, Foibles, Intrigues and Precision. And this was published in this year, 2022, by Bloomsbury Press. And I believe it's part of a series called Bloomsbury Introductions to World Philosophy. So this is this book is an introductory text, really, to the philosophy of D.T. Suzuki. People will have heard of Suzuki in relation to the Kyoto school, but also Zen. Many Western religious people may be familiar, and this is where I went when someone asked me about doing an episode on this. I recognized the name, and I realized recently Thomas Merton was where. So T.T. Suzuki, Thomas Merton was one of the big figures. So there might be somewhere else if you're thinking, oh, I know that name. That is another key place that many quote unquote Westerners, though I'm sure we'll get to the idea of East and West at some point, recognize the name T.T. Suzuki. So Rossa, just before we jump in with the work of Suzuki, just tell us a little bit about yourself and how this book came about.
Right. Yeah. Well, at the moment, I'm living in Japan. I work at a university here, Aichi Prefectural University, and my research area is in general Japanese philosophy, and in particular at the moment Kyoto school, and I also occasionally try to translate Japanese philosophy as well. And I've been studying D.T. Suzuki for quite a while. I got into him through translation studies. I was doing the philosophy of translation, and he made a great case study of translation of philosophy. But also, I've read a lot of him, and he's kind of, through him, I've been introduced to the wider world of Buddhism and Asian philosophy. So he's, I kind of see him as my kind of vicarious teacher of the philosophies of Asia. Whilst I would have my critiques and so on. This is this is developed into. For this book, I've tried to summarize and synthesize his philosophy, try and get a kind of make it into more of a system. He himself is all the time talking about philosophy, all the time talking about these ideas. And it was when the editors of the book, Takeshi Morisata Takeshi, suggested that it's meant to be 3 chapters, self-knowledge, world. And when I started to think about it, I suddenly saw there is kind of a system to that. That D.T. Suzuki philosophy does talk about self, which has implications for knowledge, which has implications for world. Okay, and then it kind of developed in kind of I would like to think a kind of a smooth kind of systematic synthesis of his ideas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, we'll get into this problem. Probably the first question I tackle, this sort of strange irony of Zen in relation to philosophy. And as you've said, I mean, a lot of people would say Zen and system is, precarious water. But before I do so, I have to ask you the Hermitix question. You can place 3 thinkers, living or dead, into a room. Living or dead, and listen in. And D.T. Suzuki is already in there waiting. Who do you pick?
Okay. The other 2 would be Slavoj Žižek and another Kyoto philosopher, Tosaka Jun. I'd pick Slavoj Žižek because he has spoken a lot about D.T. Suzuki. He took him quite seriously. He uses D.T. Suzuki as kind of his representative of kind of Buddhism or Asian philosophy in general. And I would, I'd like to hear, I can imagine how D.T. Suzuki would respond, and I'd like to hear how Suzuki would respond to D.T.'s response. I pick Toast Sakajun because when we approach D.T. Suzuki, we always make allowances for the fact that he's coming from quite a different background. Okay, there is this principle of charity where we will allow him certain contradictions or allow him certain beliefs, okay, that we mightn't agree with, but we let him away with it, okay. Toast Sakajun was part of the Kyoto school in the sense that he studied under Nishida Kitaro, the major philosopher of the Kyoto school. He went on to become a Marxist philosopher, died in prison during World War II, was imprisoned for his beliefs. I think he wouldn't let D.T. Suzuki away so quickly with a lot of the stuff D.T. Suzuki came out with. And I think that they would have a very impassionate conversation that would be worth listening into.
I'm interested. That's an interesting one. So do you think, I mean, you know, obviously many people listening to this podcast will be familiar with Zizek. I mean, sort of the equivalent of a celebrity chef when it comes to
yes.
philosophy. I mean, do you think Zizek's ideology, like Zizek's philosophy of ideology is Zen? Has relationships with Zen?
Well, in his book, what's the word? Less Than Nothing. He does talk about Suzuki. He does talk about Buddhism, but he feels that he's critical of it. Okay, he feels that it raises questions that it can't answer because it always falls back on kind of religion. Okay, the assumption that it tries to fall back on a non-materialist explanation of its materialist insights. So no, he would be. He is explicitly critical of Zen. He's also critical of what he felt was the lack of morality in Zen. Okay, as expressed by D.T. Suzuki, particularly D.T. Suzuki's controversial comments about samurai and swords and the sword does the killing. You know, he very much objected to that. He felt it was a nihilism or nihilism, as you call it, to it.
So you think that room would be pretty? Suzuki would be have to be on the defense.
He would actually. So I picked two of his well, I won't say enemies, but critics.
Do you think he would find that engaging, or do you think he'd have a different attitude towards the criticism? He'd sort of, have a different way of approaching it.
Well, this will probably come up later, but I would have a feeling he might be he might start just saying, well, Zen doesn't have a philosophy, which I would find a disappointing response, to be honest, but in some ways that is Suzuki's limitation, that he did tend to chicken out of intellectual engagements, by saying, well, Zen doesn't have a philosophy.
I mean, it's the perfect get out clause, right?
It is, isn't it? Yeah. Yes.
Did you struggle with that? I mean, was there any? Obviously these are introductory texts, so the title makes sense. But did at a certain point? I mean, I guess you have that secondary title, Strength, Foibles, Intrigues, and Precision, which sort of makes up for it. But did you sort of say, the Zen Buddhist philosophy of D.T. Suzuki, you're already entering into this problem of Zen and philosophy in the same sentence? I mean, how do we? I guess in a way that's the big circular problem that I want to say circling around, but the idea of an anchor already is a problem with Suzuki. Yeah. So how do we approach that problem of Zen and philosophy?
Yes. Well, I discussed it a bit in the introduction. First of all, I feel that you can't escape having a philosophy. Okay, even saying, my religion, my ideology doesn't have a philosophy is a philosophical stance. Okay. Secondly, his assertions, his defense of why Zen is not a philosophy, oftentimes is kind of a trivial defense. It's kind of like saying the experience of Zen and talking about Zen are two different things. But we all kind of know that, like any philosophy can make that point, that when we talk about the philosophy of the mind and actually walking around the mind are two different things. He's not saying anything that philosophy doesn't already know. Also, I don't think in a free, open society, no religion or ideology should be beyond philosophy, you know. You still have to justify what you're asserting, you know. And if you're not asserting anything, well then, you know, then don't assert anything. Don't be a religion. Don't be writing books. Okay.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, why write? I mean, so in that sense, I'd open with a huge, maybe another huge question then, which I guess is very difficult. But what is it that Suzuki wishes to assert?
He wishes to assert that Zen, if you go into your mind, if you penetrate into your mind, you will hit a certain experience, and it's a certain experience of you're existing in the here and now, okay? Which we all know we're existing here and now, but very, very rarely does the implications that hit us fully, okay? It might do randomly, you know, but if when that hits you, okay, when that knowledge hits you, the knowledge of you exist, you are here and now, here and now, here and now, that knowledge is a very real, true knowledge. It's not a knowledge that you've discovered. It's a knowledge that can't be not known. Okay, and that is the truth. He's trying to get out to the world, and the minute you get it out there, immediately there'll be a flock of philosophical vultures, you know, flying around eating. It'll die and it'll turn into a carcass for them to eat on. Okay, the minute it's put into words. So he's just saying, look, we can try to put it into words, but be aware that the minute you put it into words, it's already a dead idea. Okay, that was alive in your mind while you were experiencing it.
So of course you know exactly what I'm going to ask. How can we put it into words? I guess we've sort of touched on this. I mean, we're always going to be revolving around this problem.
Yeah.
So I guess in what sense can it be encapsulated in words? Does it have to become something other than a philosophy? Does it have to become a poetic philosophy? Does it have to become a non-philosophy? You know.
Well, I mean, it is a description of an experience, okay? But I think the role of philosophy is always to stand and look at experiences in the world, okay? Like our religious experiences, our political experiences, our the philosophy of something. So, philosophy is always entitled to look at our assertions and talk about the implications of it and for it. And again, going back to my earlier point that, okay, it's fair enough. When you put it into words, it becomes derived, secondary, mediated. Okay, but that's the way it is with all our knowledge and experiences. Like I'm just trying to think of an analogy from politics, but could you argue that since the philosophy of democracy is never real democracy is far more messier and corrupted than the philosophy of democracy. Therefore, we shouldn't have a philosophy of democracy. I don't know if that analogy works.
I understand what you mean. I mean, it's there's almost a sense of complete impotence if you would say, well, we can't write this. And do you think, if we can't put this down, if you say, right, it's only experience, we can't ever write this. And I mean, this really applies as well to monastic traditions. You would say, well, okay, well, what I've written about in my monastic experience, I'm thinking of maybe the early Carmelites, which I was reading about coincidentally this morning, sort of said, we never wrote much because it was all about the experience. But at the same time, what are we to do with it? I mean, this is Suzuki's position. Do you think his difference as someone practicing Zen is he is admitting to that, look, we're going to have to deal with this always secondary thing. Otherwise, where's the history? Where's anything? Something has to be solidified.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you raise an interesting point that if you do experience this, this, let's use the word Satori. Okay. That's the word for it, for this awareness, enlightenment of what I'm defining as awareness of enlightenment of you being here and now, Satori. Okay. You can, do nothing about it. Okay, and the whole Zen monastery tradition is that, you know, there are Zen monasteries, temples here in Japan where people are experiencing Satori all the time, and just, you know, it's in some ways that's their experience, you know. But you know, for Suzuki, you know, he even though it can't be put into words, he still was driven to try and show the world, look, you know, there is something here. He was particularly driven by the scientism and skepticism and nihilism of modern times, where you know, people stop believing in religions because they think religions are a bit crazy and superstitious, and you know, and to think that science can explain everything. And you know, he's just coming at that, saying, look, there's this Satori experience which shows, number one, that religions, you know, are not, religions can be understood as true because of the experience of their truth, okay? Not through blind faith. And science can't get at everything. Science can't get at the here and now. So that's where his philosophy is coming from. It's not so much to take a photograph of his experience, to describe his experience, to write it down in poetry. It's to get that Satori experience out into the public marketplace of ideas, to fight battles for religion against excessive rationality and excessive skepticism.
So would he argue that religion as that structure is built up from multiple individual Satori's experiences, but those experiences, even though they're individual, must share a common thread?
Yes, yeah, he would. He'd say, you know, when you experience that Satori of the here and now, you're tapping into a knowledge that has existed. Potentially any human can experience that. Any human can know that, you know, and it will be the same knowledge. It's illogical to think it will be a different knowledge, because it's not a knowledge of anything, okay? You know what I mean? Because if it's a knowledge of something, then it's not here and now. It's over there.
As soon as you can say that thing, it's either been or gone, or you're going to it.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Yes, yes.
So I'm intrigued. Did your interest in this? Did this begin from personal Satori, or did it begin from the philosophy, and then you went? Do you practice, or?
Yeah, no, actually, no. I'll admit I don't practice, and as I said, it came from out of intellectual curiosity. Okay, and I've been treating Suzuki in that way, you know, in a secular way. But I do have, you know, I do have my own, you know, religious beliefs, and definitely, you know, I think most of us understand, do get hit by that idea of we exist here and now. Okay, so I mean, Suzuki does talk about, you know, Satori is a question of intensity. There's big Satoris, little Satoris. Well, that was Kostler said that in a criticism, in mocking. But yeah, you know, in other words, it's every individual has a certain shades of the Satori, you know, experience. And yes, you know, I mean, I'm very comfortable discussing Satori, even though Suzuki or some people might point their finger and go, well, you haven't practiced, you haven't signed up, you're the wrong nationality. I say, no, excuse me. If we take you by your word, and, you know, my feeling about it is as valid as yours, you know?
Is that Arthur Kostler?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Him and Suzuki didn't get on.
Wow, I can imagine. I've read, what is it? A Ghost in the Machine by Kostler, and that's...
Right.
I mean, I was just surprised you mentioned him, because those two positions are...
Yeah.
Sort of, as I understand, Kostler is sort of a radical Russian, somewhat with a Russian taint behaviorist.
Wow. Middle European, yeah.
So, in what sense then can there be... I mean, just because I do this Western thing of loving a teleology, right? It's like the Western compulsion of like, all right, where are we going? Let's get there. Let's get this done. In the sense of an evolution, in the sense that the thing that you're finding isn't something that you're creating or developing, but it's something that's being revealed that always was in relation to a Satori.
Yes.
Is it that there could be a teleology,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
all you're ever going to be doing is revealing that. And perhaps you're going to reveal that the teleology that I'm going to assume maybe the teleology that is that there isn't going to be a teleology.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think, right. Okay. The idea behind the teleology is, we have a meaning because we're part of a story. Okay. And the story is leading towards something, and we're playing a role in it, and we're going there. So the end is at the end is at the end of the story. Okay. And now is just part of the story. Okay. That's my rough understanding of teleology. Suzuki would say no. That story is again secondary, mediated. It's a projection. It's the end is now. Okay, not in the future. Okay, it's you're already at the end of the story. Okay, which doesn't imply that there was no story, but rather it's so, it's there's a level. You see, when you have a story, you're already carving things out in the world. You're already excluding certain things. You're already putting in certain characters that exclude other possible characters. You to make a story, otherwise it's not tellable. Okay, and Suzuki would say, okay, fine, but look at all the stuff you're cutting out, and here's a story where it includes every possible story. Okay, that's what it is. It's the story of stories.
That's nice.
That when you're at the point of now, that's where it all comes from.
So that would be a good thing to focus on, to really as almost like a disproof that this isn't just a nihilism.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's not at all. No, because for him, the stories that emerge from that, okay, there is a contingency, arbitrariness about, as I just said, you're having this story and not that story, but they're still coming from a valid source. Okay, it's not just mindless projections to cope with the nihility. We have to accept that they're coming out of us, because that's. Where else would they come out of,
So from this position of now, though, is the future, are they possibilities, or are they things which are just going to be revealed and given?
Yeah, that's getting into the free will question.
For Suzuki, would I be jumping too much by saying we even need to think about that, Because all you ever really should be dealing with is the Satori of the now. So in saying, well, what's coming, it's like, well, don't worry about that.
Yeah. Well, he still has to deal with time. He can't deny that there is a world out there. And we go back to it once. The thing about Satori is it does actually come and go. You go back to everyday world knowledge, and that has to be dealt with. Okay, Suzuki will, in his rhetoric, dismiss and go, it doesn't matter, you philosophers asking these questions, but he does, he has to account for it. So sorry, what exactly was your question?
So from the position of now, is what's coming, is it a possibility in the sense of I guess you could say multiple different options, in relation to this idea of nihilism. Nihilism's sort of negated if you say, well, I'm choosing from different things, or are these things given? And that is a question of free will.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, like Suzuki himself is, he bounces around with this issue. Okay, there is a complete openness. Okay, into the future. He says, the man of Zen is gone. I'm not quoting his exact words, but it's more or less the paraphrase. The man of Zen has gone into God's workshop, taking his tools and is going to start banging away this creativity. Okay. So there is this sense of pure openness in the future, there is also this sense that the future's already happened, okay? That there is this fusion between, because the world out there and you looking into it are at some level hyper connected, that you are being carried along by the world, and the world is being carried along by you. Okay. And that is the happy message, that you are utterly free. Okay. Okay. You are, because you're at the point of here and now, which is not part of space time, cause and effect. Plus you are being carried along by this world that you are hyper connected with. So it bounces between free will and determinism. I think the ideal Zen man, person of Zen, would be this awareness that you do have to act in this world. Okay, you do have to behave. Okay, the world. You're not a puppet. The world, if you wait there, nothing. You just the world's not going to move you for you. On the other hand, everything is already in motion. I hope this doesn't sound frivolous, but in one of the Harry Potter novels, okay, J.K. Rowling novels, Harry Potter for half an hour drinks this little lucky potion, I think it's called, or a happy potion or something, and
liquid luck.
What's that was called? Yeah,
liquid luck, I think. Yeah, I remember.
Okay. Oh, good, because it's a long time since I read it. So if I can't remember the details, I'd love if somebody could fill me in. And he has to go find something. And Hermione and the other guy, they say, "Oh, let's go." Obviously, it's in over there, maybe in the library or something. And he goes, "No, I think I'll go visit my friend, the spider." And he just goes off randomly. And for some reason, he has this feeling that for the next half an hour, no matter what he does, no matter how strange it is, it'll be the right choice. Okay? Because it's already fated that everything's going to turn out well for him. Okay? But he's still acting. He's still making those choices, Harry Potter, at that time. The potion doesn't create a little, humulus or whatever inside him going, go that way, go this way. He's still just feeling it. But he's feeling that connection where the future's already decided. So just go with it,
J.K. Rowling, she's never really, respected for her work on free will and.
No, she's not. No.
She's really found the key.
Yeah. There you go.
I actually think, despite, my listeners are going to berate me now, but despite not being a big fan of the Harry Potter novels, actually that's a fantastic analogy of the fact, well, he's not suddenly in commune with some god who's going, right, you drank the potion, which means you're now talking to me, but equally he's not just a robot. He's in touch with whatever that thing is, but that equally does but that isn't, so a Christian would read that as being more intensely in touch with God's will, but that's definitely not there isn't a God here that we're speaking of with this Suzuki.
Right.
No,
that's a good question. I do point out in the book that he does talk about Karuna and Prajna. Karuna is, let's say, love. Prajna is wisdom. And where is that coming from? Is that coming from another? A machine can't love you. Only another personality, another personhood, okay, can love you. And wisdom as well, it takes a conscious knowing, okay? So when he's talking about these Buddhist ideals of Prajna, Karuna, is he setting up an other that knows you're there and loves the fact that you're there, okay? That is the religious idea that compared to materialism, naturalism, that the universe knows you're there and loves the fact that you're there, okay? Whereas a materialist would say, no, the universe doesn't know you're there. There's no knowing, there's no consciousness out there to know you're there, okay? And Suzuki is going for that religious answer that the world out there is aware that you're here, okay? Okay, it's not blind nature. Okay, now it is a problem how much other that Karuna Prajna is. Okay, it's see if it's not other, if you can jump into it, okay, through at the depths of your mind, okay, and become one with it. Then it's not other. It's just you again. It's not another person. It's just you with a bigger mind, or a substitute mind or whatever. Okay. So that is a problem. Okay. Trying to for him to try and account for not having a godhead, but still having the love and wisdom in the universe. Like a lot of the Kyoto school, he was quite happy to talk about God. Okay. He felt, and they were all like this, Nishitani as well, Nishida, Tanabe, they all used the word God when it suited them. Okay. And they were happy to do so. And that's what's great about the Kyoto school. That's, this kind of free borrowing from different religions, So he was, in one of his books, The Field of Zen, Suzuki does talk about, God. What's the phrase he uses? God wanted to see himself, so he looks into the mirror and creates the world, or something like that. So and sorry, just going into that whole idea of this, how much is yourself connected to the world? Okay, there was an issue within Buddhism, okay, between what's called self-power, jiliki, and other power, taliki. Okay, self-power is the Zen way. Okay, you go in, you get your Satori, okay, and the absolute knowledge is there for you to know. Okay, and there's no otherness. Okay, there can't be. It's that would be inaccessible knowledge. Okay. Yeah. Now, taliki is the idea that there is an otherness. Okay. That wisdom, love is coming from what's called the bodhisattva. Okay. The Buddhist saints, as they call them. Okay. In particular, in the case of in Jodo Buddhism in Japan, Amida. Okay. Now, Tanabe, one of the big philosophers of the Kyoto school, he promoted this idea of Jodo Buddhism and of Taliki, other power, because he felt you needed an otherness. Otherwise, you lose. You're not able to account for history. You're not able to account for other people. And he criticized, Nishida for his excessive oneness of the self and its inability to include this otherness, this unknownness.
So it's so is this lack of otherness? I mean, does this relate back to the thing you mentioned at the start about Zizek's critique in relation to the sword does the killing, right? That there's just something else working that we can't get a hold of in a way. So I mean, how does that really make sense that the sword does the killing? I mean, is it related to this idea that there's sort of this, for Zen, there's this impasse of the other?
Well, the sword does the killing is kind of like the Harry Potter lucky liquid, is it? What's it called?
Liquid luck.
Liquid luck. That when the samurai is so trained in his movements, where it's like that, where every action he makes is just simply fated to happen. Okay, because the future has already happened. Okay, he is so part of the world. His self is disappeared, is dissolved into the world. Okay, and it's that. So when he's swinging the sword, it's just like rain falling. Okay, rain falls.
That does make complete sense. Yeah,
sword swing. Yeah.
So it's always this. I don't want to say complementary or clearly not dualistic, but like not a synthesis either, because they're really one and the same but different between the world and the self as moving forward in time, constantly in the present. So in a sense, one is at fault when they are perhaps increasing that separation, when they are, saying there's the world and here's the self. Would that be right?
Sorry, one is at fault.
You're sort of at fault in the Zen tradition if you were, causing a separation between the world and the self.
Yes, the Zen tradition would try and argue against that, making too much of a distinction between world and self.
So what are the key differences then for Suzuki? I mean, he's as I understand it, he's somewhat of a controversial figure in Zen, but is that primarily just because he wrote it down?
Well, okay, he's controversial for many reasons, for many different people. For the, let's say, official Zen as an institutional religion, for example, here in Japan. He's controversial, like not as in they all hate him, but in the sense that he overdid it. His rhetoric was too good, you know. It's they had all these Westerners turning up expecting, you know, expecting too much, and they feel, you know, he described a fairly regular religion in you know, such awesome mystical terms that, you know, they feel he might have overstated their case, you know, but also they respect him for that, because, you know, he obviously did Zen a great service, you know. Other criticisms would relate to this idea that he probably, in a sense, made up a new Zen. Okay. I don't know. I wouldn't agree with that. I feel he explained it the way he explains it, and he was going to explain it the way somebody in his times and with his background was going to explain it, you know. And I think that's fair enough. And in some ways, he was associated with a temple in Kamakura, it's south of Tokyo, called Engakuji, and his two Zen masters. He was himself never a Zen monk, by the way. Shaku Soin and what's his name, Imakita Kosen. They themselves were part of a movement that was trying to bring Zen out into the greater community, often by explaining Zen in terms of other ideologies. At the other time, the big dominant ideology was Neo-Confucianism, and Kosen, you know, wrote books trying to explain Zen in terms of Confucianism. So Suzuki was just basically carrying on that tradition, explaining Zen to different philosophical traditions and borrowing from those traditions to explain it better. It was fair enough, I think. And then also he gets criticized for his politics, but that's a very complicated issue. Yeah.
Is there any way to? I guess no. I did. I guess,
no, I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, what are his politics sort of? I guess in miniature.
Yeah. Okay. No, he was a man of his time. You know, he was born in 1870 Japan. Okay. So his views reflect basically mainstream Japanese views throughout that era, where Japan is modernizing. He thinks that's good. Japan wins wars that the rest of the world respected him for. You know, war against Russia, war against China. Okay, we're talking about the 1890s, early 1900s. You know, Japan is the ally in World War I, sits at the Treaty of Versailles table. He's slow to spot Japan's decline into kind of militarism. Okay. He doesn't, in all fairness to me, at any point really come out supporting militarism. But people have found random quotes. He was such a voluminous writer that wouldn't be hard. Okay, he said, you know, he wrote about everything and books and books and books. So if you want to find some not very nice quotes, you'll find it. Okay,
yeah.
But the point is, my argument is always, if he had supported militarism, if he had supported Showa emperor fascism, it would have been very obvious. You wouldn't have to be combing through looking for quotes. Okay, no, he didn't. But on the other hand, he was living in Japan. He was, you know, he saw, you know, he it would have been hard for him to come out and say, no, we shouldn't be doing this. You know, he like anybody in those kind of crises, he kind of just went on with his life and just hoped this war would be over soon, you know.
One of those cases where it's far easier for us in, you know, 100 years retrospect to say, well, if I was there, I'd have known all the facts, right? Like, well, you do now, but when you're in the midst of it, especially in the time without the internet, the time without mass communication now, it's like, well, you know, it's a ridiculous critique. There's so many philosophers that this happens to go. I said this one thing one time. They're fascist, you know, okay.
Exactly. It is like that. Yeah. No, I think he, you know, he doesn't have much to answer for in terms of that, in terms of the war, in terms of it. And his politics was, you know, mainstream conservative politics. You know, he at one point he was a bit of a socialist, and then in later life he, you know, the young people listen to bad music and, that kind of stuff. It's regular, where I would criticize him, I think the damage he did, okay, was just his obsessional Orientalism, okay? Just the way he constantly went on about the East and the West, difference between the East and the West. And that was picked up by a lot of intellectuals at the time. And I think it's kind of poisoned the spread of Japanese philosophy. People's automatic default assumption is that Japanese philosophy is so different to our way of thinking, we'll never understand it, and that's such the wrong so much the wrong approach,
what were for him the key differences then between East and West thinking?
His big kind of trendy idea that he wined and dined on was that in the West we divide subject and object, in the East we transcend subject and object. Okay, sorry, Westerners divide between subject and object, Easterners transcend subject and object. Okay, for me, when you think about that's meaningless. Okay, that's Westerners do not divide between subject and object. Okay, philosophers might have talked about it in philosophy, but Westerners don't go through life going, I'm subject, object, subject, object, subject, object. Do you know what I mean? It's just...
I mean, it's been the trajectory of. I mean, you could, if you were to be very specific, if he'd have said Descartes separate subject. Sure. Yeah. But beyond that, I mean, that since Descartes, it has been one of the key problems of philosophy. And Hume has been read as an Eastern philosopher because of this, because he doesn't have that. But I'm sort of in agreement with your frustration there. In Suzuki's talking about that, it seems that he's already saying, well, we're all talking about the same thing, right?
And also he doesn't even limit it to philosophy. It's just every aspect of Western life is subject-object division. As I said, it's obsessional. It's like the West is ballet where people are jumping up and down, getting away from the world, whereas the East has no drama, where it's very grounded.
No one in these jumps.
Because one is, or even linguistics where we say it rains because it is the subject and rains is the object, whereas in Japanese language you just say raining, okay. Which is not, linguistically that doesn't make sense. There's a reason why some languages use the word the what's called the empty subject. And other languages don't within Europe, in other words, because he had this idea, it was kind of like everything he saw in the West and East could be filtered through this notion that everything they're doing is dualistic, everything we're doing is non-dualistic. And he could apply it to the most trivial aspects of life, with the result that rather than creating a bridge between East and West, he was creating a massive wall.
Yeah. I mean, is he one of? Do you see him in a way as one of the big historical players of people who have solidified that sort of quite fallacious East-West divide?
Yeah, I think so. I think he I think he was influential in the mid-20th century. He was kind of the Asian philosopher. When there was some American documentary makers who were interviewing living philosophers, and when they said, "Oh, we should include somebody from the East," it was D.T. Suzuki. Because he spoke English and he such a good level of knowledge about these issues and such a idiosyncratic philosophy of Zen that he attracted a lot of attention. And I think a lot of people, both East and West, it suits them to think that that there is this silk wall, when all the time there's a silk road.
Makes it a lot easier to suddenly not study a whole.
Yes, exactly.
Is that why this sort of relation between Suzuki, psychoanalysis, and the occult that you touch on a little bit in your book comes in? Is once again there is this separation, but it's on a different level. These things are psychoanalysis specifically. You have the conscious, the subconscious, or the unconscious,
right.
And the occult you have whatever you want. There is always a split there. Is that where Suzuki has a relationship with these, or is it something more?
Yeah, no, he did see crossovers between psychoanalysis and the occult and Buddhism. Okay. On the one hand, he did have a very Orientalist view, but he would say, East and West are completely different. He also had a view that the East has covered the West. Okay, all the West are struggling with stuff, but that the West are catching up with the East. Okay, like they believe in this Cartesian dualism, and someday they'll realize no. It's it's the oneness or whatever. So in that spirit, he does approach psychoanalysis, and as I argue in the book, the key point, the key crossover is this idea that our minds have there's a part of us that is a part of us, but acts like it's a stranger to us. Okay. Within our minds, there's these things that we don't know, even though they're part of us. Okay. There's thoughts we have that are coming right from our minds because they're not coming from somewhere else. And yet they're the thoughts of a stranger to us. Okay. And for psychoanalysis, that those thoughts are coming from our animal instincts, okay? Because we evolved from animals and they're still there, these instincts. And our subconscious job is to keep them repressed, okay, so that we don't behave inappropriately. And most of the time we succeed in that. Yeah. For Suzuki and I think for Carl Jung, who's very interested in Suzuki, no, that part of our mind that's a stranger to us, that's feeding us these thoughts that we don't think are coming from us, is a part of the mind that's extremely connected to the world in an almost mystical way. Yeah. Okay. It's not an animal instincts; it's rather angel instincts, if you could say. And both psychoanalysis and Buddhism are touching on that unknown part of the mind, okay? And that's, of course, also why we can get into the occult, because the occult would also argue that, our mind has certain powers that if we could only tap into, and those powers come again from a connectivity. Yeah. The idea is Buddhism, Suzuki's Buddhism, Carl Jung's psychoanalysis, and occult would say, as I said, there's a part of our mind unknown to us. And that part of our mind that is unknown to us is actually at the level where it's utterly connected to the wider world, the wider cosmos. Yeah.
So that thing that comes in and tries to tell us to be or to do certain other things, is that what Suzuki would consider to be, when I say I am doing this or I like this, the I, is that what Suzuki would consider to be the I? He'd feel he wouldn't be the same as the psychoanalysis in the sense that you're constantly getting these fairly coherent subconscious thoughts. It's more that there's your mind that you're conscious of, which is embedded in a much bigger mind, okay, which is kind of beyond thinking, So the I, the real I is that conscious mind plus this deeper mind, okay, and the deeper mind is not just an extension of the conscious mind; it's something in a different mode altogether from the conscious mind, because the conscious mind is full of ephemeral thoughts that are coming and going, whereas the deeper mind is the thoughts don't come and go. Okay. Yeah. So in the sense, to go back to that Harry Potter metaphor of the luck, when he's in that mode, he's in a deeper connection to that.
Yeah, I would say that. I would say that. Yes.
I think it's a good way to think about it. I think it's
we can ask J.K. Rowling if she would endorse that Zen. Yeah, that Zen perspective. Yeah.
Well, we seem to really quickly gone through a lot of the key points in the book. I mean, is there anything key about the book that you'd like to add in, or you think we've jumped over here?
Yeah, there is the issue of Zen's connection with the real world and history, okay? And there is always this problem that Zen is about the here and now, the Satori of the here and now, and when you express it, explain it, it becomes mediated and derived, and in that sense, false. Like, I mean, Suzuki Zen would argue that it's not a case that words can't express it, okay, which a lot of philosophies would agree with. It's the case that when words do express it, it's automatically wrong, okay? that the words don't miss it, but the words actually go into the truth and distort it and monsterize it and, uglify it. And that's why we have to be so careful of words and but anyway, the point is, it's in the pure state of the here and now, and the minute it leaves that, goes into the there and the then, it's lost it a bit. Now, on the other hand, Suzuki was always writing about Zen culture in Japan. One of his famous books is the Zen in Japanese culture, okay, where he describes all the Zen arts, like controversially samurai sword fighting, but also tea ceremony, also poetry, the haiku, the little, 7-syllable poems, the Zen style of painting, but in doing so, Suzuki is kind of walking himself into a major contradiction, because on the one hand, Zen is meant to be pure and acultural, okay? It's the here and now. Cannot be mediated. On the other hand, he's describing this clear Zen culture, which is contrasted to a non-Zen culture, as in, let's say, ballet versus no theater. And so, which is it? Is Zen a specific particular culture, or is Zen the spirit of everything?
Yeah, I guess he's admitting to the fact, well, Zen does have a name, right?
Yes,
so like pure Zen almost is like, you'd say, what do you practice? And you just wouldn't say anything or something. But the fact that something has, in some sense, solidified over time, and there's some understanding of when you say Zen, something is brought about that, as you say, there is. So these things such as haikus, etc., these are, Suzuki sees these as representatives of as close as we could get in a way of what happens when you do practice Zen. They're
the cultural products of Zen.
So would sort of more quote unquote strict Zen teachers, would they say that such practices could never be?
Well, I think it's more Suzuki's problem. See, that as I was saying, the Zen religion felt Suzuki kind of overstated his case. Now, I'm talking for a religion of thousands of people. Let's say these are small conversations I would have had, casual conversations I would have had with Zen practitioners here in Japan. When they're, I didn't sit down and interview them, just casually, but they feel it's the opposite, that Zen will naturally produce certain arts and certain behaviors, modes of behavior, and because of that, we have to be careful of claims that Zen is the spirit of everything. Zen is in all religions. And I think it's more Suzuki who had to face that contradiction within his thinking.
So they're almost saying, like, these things come about, but why do we need to talk about them? Why do we need to solidify them more in writing? Haikus is just a haiku, like organically, just leave it where it is as a... Okay. But then at the same time, in affirming something for Suzuki and writing something, he's always in a bind, right?
Yeah. Now he will say that the thing with philosophy, he says in a number of places from quite early on that he feels there's three modes of truth: science, rationality, philosophy, and religion, and he says science is, like the rest of the Kyoto school, he doesn't deny science. Science is correct, there's no point in pretending rockets fly to the moon because of little goblins, it's whatever, fuel and all that, but and rationality is correct as well, the 1 + 1 = 2, but they are limited. Okay, they're limited, and it's only religion that can encompass it all. And religion itself is based on Zen. Okay, all religions. Okay, when they're true, it's because they're channeling the Zen, the experience of here and now. Okay, now, so he would say, look, as he says in certain places, Zen can't have a philosophy. It's beyond philosophy, blah blah blah. But Zen can't avoid going into philosophy. Okay, so he just sees philosophy as strategic. It's something he has to do. Something he has to engage in.
Yeah, that makes sense. That does make sense. Yeah. So where can we see him in the? I mentioned Thomas Merton at the start, which is where some people have heard of him. But where can we see his influence in the world today? Is there anyone who's really working with him today? Well, I'm sure lots of people are working with him, of course.
Yeah. I think, while he was alive, he was a great networker. So Thomas Merton, Eric Fromm, Carl Jung, they all kind of knew him and and communicated with him. Since he's passed away, he's still always mentioned. Okay, he still is the go-to philosopher for the East. That's why Slavoj Žižek mentions him. Okay, but I think slowly the other philosophers in the Kyoto school, Nishida, Kitaro, Tanabe, who take an awful lot more work and effort and still have to be largely translated, but also have really hardcore, heavyweight, coherent philosophies, behind them. I think they're starting to emerge, as kind of the philosophical work that, scholars will be engaging in. I think, Suzuki kind of, he was a pioneer, he opened the space for the Kyoto school to he prepared the way for a philosophy that's going to sound, very different, okay, when you first hear it, okay. And so I think he's attuned our ears for the wider Kyoto school.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Where would you advise people begin then with both Suzuki and the Kyoto school? I mean, obviously, I'll say it. This is your own book, Zen Buddhist Philosophy of D.T. Suzuki, is a fantastic text on the work of Suzuki. So that's a good place to start. But I mean, Suzuki's own work, I guess, would be another question. For Suzuki's works, his book, An Introduction to Zen Buddhism, that was very key for him. Because I think before that book, his take on Zen was quite sober. It was just, he was describing Zen as one more religion, okay? And he was quite happy to, he was quite happy with the comparisons with other religions. It's when you get to An Introduction to Zen Buddhism that he starts to go wild, that we see the Suzuki we all know, where he makes the extravagant claims for Zen and really fights his corner and fights any possible, attack on Zen's standpoint. Now, Zen as the core origin of all religions. Okay, but it is a very rhetorically laden work. Okay, a lot of assertions going on. If you were to wanted to see a more kind of coherent argumentation coming from Suzuki, his book, The Essence of Buddhism, it was based on 2 lectures he gave to the Emperor of Japan. And he's talking also not just about Zen, but other Kegon school of Buddhism. But there he's far more, systematic in his explanations of Buddhism, the essence of Buddhism. There's also his book, Mysticism and Christian and Buddhism. It's a collection of essays. The earlier ones are quite good for his explanation of nothingness and so on. He wrote an awful lot. A lot of his works have very lengthy quotations. Okay, which on the one hand that's so interesting because you get a huge insight into you get to read early texts from ancient China. The only problem is they're so long, his quotations, that even he forgets the point he was making. Wow. So are you now are you going to write more on Suzuki? Are you working on another book on Suzuki, or taking a break?
To be honest, I think I'll always be working on Suzuki, but I feel in that book I've said as much as I can say about Suzuki, and I'm kind of slipping off quietly to do other Kyoto school philosophers, in particular Tanabe at the moment, Tanabe Hajime, and also because there's another philosopher who's not officially part of the Kyoto schools, but he's very similar, Izutsu Toshihiko, because he was so similar to Suzuki. I feel I could, I could access him quite easily, but. I think I'm going to try and move on to other philosophers. But, Suzuki will always be there, I'm sure I'll always be coming back to him.
Mm-hmm. So this is published by Bloomsbury, so I'm assuming we can find it via the Bloomsbury site and probably via Amazon and all lovely bookstores. The Zen Buddhist Philosophy of D.T. Suzuki. Is there anything you'd like to add or add in that you feel we've missed?
I think we've covered most of it, Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much.
Yes. Thank you.